Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm Matt Connerton, and of course, to my right, looking stylish in his blue turtleneck, the Honorable Gary S. Hopper.
Matt,
and you,
good evening to you.
And you won your election, of course.
Of course, I won my election.
You are virtually undefeated.
Well, it's like they said about the election. A lot of it's about looks.
Yes, looks and, dare I say, charisma.
Charisma
Yes.
and looks will get you a lot of votes, and that's basically how I pull it off every 2 years.
Yep.
Greg does not look convinced.
I was actually thinking that your turtleneck is more of a periwinkle than a blue.
What's that mean?
It's a shade of blue.
Heterosexual guys don't know the difference in the names of the different shades, you know.
I personally have about 10, but I've heard these rumors. There's 10 colors I have.
Okay. Anyway, Greg Moore is our guest. He is the reigning champion and king of American for Prosperity in the state of New Hampshire.
That's
Is
right.
That correct? I think that's the exact title.
Yep, I think that's that. I'll check my business card, but I'm pretty sure that's what it says on it.
It should be. That should be on your business card.
And first of all, congratulations, Gary.
Thank you.
I'm going to have to question the voters of Deer and Waring and ask them if they knew what they really were doing.
They really knew?
Yeah.
That's going to take a while because the houses are far apart.
Yeah, they're pretty far apart.
That's right.
Yeah.
Another good point.
Yeah.
But that is a legitimate question. I was going to say this on Facebook because I say some silly stuff on Facebook, as people know that follow it. And I was going to say this, but I was afraid people who didn't know how ridiculous I am would definitely take it the wrong way. And what it was is, if you remember the old Groucho Marx statement when he was offered like a membership to some club, he says, "I would never belong to a club that would have me as a member."
That's right.
And I was going to put on Facebook that I have very little respect for anybody that would actually vote for me as their state legislator, which is funny.
Yeah.
But if you don't get in contact,
Right,
it's like,
right.
what a jerk.
Yeah. Certainly not something you want to say right before the election.
No.
Right, and is it
before
one of
the
those, as they like to say, if you put something on Facebook, make sure you put something on there that you wouldn't mind sharing with both your best friends and your worst enemies.
Oh yeah, I know. Well, I actually did that last night after the election because I had this altercation at the polls yesterday.
You did?
Oh yeah. Now keep in mind, I don't know what it's like in the big city, but in Ware at the middle school we have the polling place, and I don't know, a dozen or so of us stand outside. I was holding my sign with Marilinda Garcia's sign. Sometimes I was holding Jerry Little signs to help him, and sometimes I was holding Dan Donovan's sign, stuff like that. And the Democrat, the top of the ticket Democrat that was going against me, Rockland Ware, is there, and we're telling jokes all day long. The guy is a really nice guy. He's wicked funny. He had a pair of scissors taped to his
Totem.
Totem. A pair of scissors. He says, "You know why I got that on there?" He says, "Because Mom told me never to run with scissors." He's got like a sense of humor, like
and yet they elected you and not him.
I know. So it's not the sense of humor thing, because he's wicked funny. He's a really nice guy. Anyway, so we're joking around all day.
So he has no place in the New Hampshire House of Representatives.
No, none whatsoever. So anyway, he's a nice guy. We're talking. I'm talking to the Democrats and the Senate candidate. I've forgotten her name for my district was there. The Democrat Linda Tanner was there, and she's getting along with Jerry Little talking. So all day we're just goofing around and being friendly. And Evelyn Connor, who was running against John Burt, my grandson took off to get her some iced tea and stuff because she's had some health problems and stuff, and she's a sweetheart. But anyway, there's a lot of nice people just believe different things, and we hang around. Then this woman comes in. And I don't even want to remember what county office she was running for. She's a Democrat. She comes in looking for a Democrat so they would hold her sign for her while she went around the rest of the county. Okay, and then she blurts out that those Tea Party Republicans are all Nazis. I'm going, whoa, that's amazing that people actually believe that, and so. So I can't handle it, because I'm a Tea Party guy. I mean, I was down at the Tea Party.
Are you a Nazi? Have you ever been a Nazi?
I can't even lift my arm high enough now after the motorcycle accident anymore to do that.
Anymore?
Anymore. So no, I was down at the 2009 Tea Party thing, and I was the one that was involved in trying to take Justice Souter's house
Right.
after the that insane eminent domain case.
Kilo.
Kelo versus State of Connecticut, or the City of New London. So Tea Party is. I was in the Tea Party before the water was boiling. Okay, and I was.
I thought
down-
you were at the Tea Party in Boston.
No, not that one. I
Okay.
was close. I was too young to go. Mom wouldn't let me. So I was in 2009 when I went down there to the Tea Party rally in D.C. There was at least 500,000 people, and there was no arrests. There were people my age, older, some younger, just mad because the federal government was so profoundly overstepping its bounds, federalizing the education system, federalizing health care, bailing out big banks when people are losing their homes.
Stimulus, TARP.
It was an insane power grab by the federal government that people went down to protest for, and they were angry as much at Obama as they were Nancy Pelosi or Harry Reid. It had nothing to do with race, but the media wanted to make it about race, so that's where people got the idea that there's Nazis or something. But anyway, 500,000 people, nobody got arrested. There was no litter. They didn't have to clean up after us. It wasn't like the 99% thing. But it was all just people who were upset with the government. And so she calls us, anybody in the Tea Party, Nazis. I'm going, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then I says, oh, yeah, I'm kind of like that myself, I says, I just can't wait to get elected tonight and go back into Concord and just start continuing my relentless war on women. Right? And you should have seen the freaking wheels turning. You can look at her eyes, and she's trying to figure out if I'm kidding.
Which you're used to.
Oh, yeah. But she's like nuts. She was really, I mean, she believes what she's saying. I'm just kidding around.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, saying Nazi is okay, but
Yeah, Nazis, calling, a conservative a Nazi is perfectly acceptable in today's... But in all honesty, though, and to be fair, after she did that, you saw the Democrats kind of turning away, trying to look for some place to hide, because they didn't want to have anything to do with her. One Democrat said, yeah, I'll take your sign. And she took the sign. As soon as the lady was out of the driveway, she threw it over on the side.
Oh, no kidding.
Oh, yeah, they didn't want to have anything to do with her. They didn't care if she was a Democrat. She was a loony.
they just want to take a sign so she go away.
Yeah, just please leave. Because it was like friendly and stuff all the way up until that point, until she got in there and started calling Republicans Nazis, which...
And it's amazing, if you've ever done poll standing, which I think it's a great way to get actively involved.
Is that like dancing only?
Well, pole dancing is different, but pole standing is it's what happens when you get older. The older pole dancers are pole standing.
So once you can't pole dance anymore, you
that's right. That's right. But the
that
folks,
makes sense.
the folks who are out
so
there.
So when you're like not 70, do you do pole sitting?
That could
Yeah.
well be. That's the progression.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so.
But no, they're usually very friendly people, and particularly when it's locals and they're talking with their neighbors. But then you suddenly have folks who come in who aren't from the area, and they don't have any relationship with those people, and for them they're either your friend or your enemy, and that just sort of makes the whole thing go sideways. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about.
It was so obvious and so crazy.
We have a call.
Whoa!
Probably someone who wants to call you a Nazi.
Probably Ross.
Hi, welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. Who's this?
This is Eddie. Thanks for taking my call.
Hi, Ed.
Hi, Eddie.
What's
Hey,
up?
Listen, I just got a quick question for you guys, okay? And I was wondering if maybe you could answer it for me. Why is it that the Republicans, both in the city of Manchester and really statewide, continually field weak candidates year after year? Why is that? And I don't mean that personally. That's an objective observation. But where was Jeb Bradley? Where are the, just go ahead with that. Why is it that way?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say it's really objectively that they're weak candidates. I suppose that is a subjective
Depends
viewpoint.
on what you like.
Exactly, but I would say first and foremost, there are a lot of trends that go on that have very little to do with the candidates, and for people like Gary and me who've gotten to know a lot of these people, and you might get to know these folks, and you say, boy, this really isn't a weak person, but sometimes.
Oh, no, I'm sure. I mean, Walt Hammerstein, I didn't like that they referred to him as a retired corporate CEO. The guy was also, first and foremost in my mind, a graduate of the United States Naval Academy. He was a career Marine. To me, that means something, but they didn't refer to him. I'm sure he's a great guy. I'm sure all these weak candidates that the Republicans can continually run for office are terrific people if you have a beer with them, if you're golfing with them. But it's I mean, I'm a registered Democrat, okay, but I wish that the Republicans fielded stronger candidates, but they don't. And it's not a personal slam, but it's just my observation.
And I would say I've gotten to know a lot of the candidates, and I've watched the political process for a long time, and I would say that the candidates on both sides have their strengths and weaknesses. I don't think the Democrat candidates necessarily are any stronger than Republican candidates in New Hampshire. I would say that they both have their pluses and minuses, and it's just a matter of being in the right place at the right time is usually what makes us great candidates. I mean, every once in a while there's a generational politician we see in the state of New Hampshire, like a Judd Gregg or a John Lynch, and they come on both sides.
If he were ran against Gene Shaheen, he'd be a United States Senator-elect right now.
Oh.
Where was he?
Jeb Bradley.
He's Senate Majority Leader, right?
No, he's not Majority Leader.
He is.
No.
Yeah, Senate President's Chuck Morris, and he's the Majority Leader.
Oh, Majority. Okay, yeah, I was thinking the President.
Well, I mean, if he would have ran instead of Scott Brown or against Scott Brown, they couldn't have put the carpetbagger label on him.
Right.
He's got strong New Hampshire roots.
Well, yeah, but
that was baggage.
States congressman.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily the problem. Is optics. A lot of times people get attacked right out of the gate. I was reading something from what is his name? What's the Russian that came to the United States in the early '70s and Uranovsky? No.
Oh, Solzhenitsyn.
Solzhenitsyn.
Anyways.
Yeah. Anyway, he was speaking at Harvard University. I think it was '78. And if you go online and read it, and he was talking about that anybody with any real integrity that tries to run for office, they're going to be immediately assaulted by both the left and the right because they're not kind of like, in some ways, they're not even bought and paid for. They're not part of the system, so they get assaulted. But we had Jim Rubens, which fits your bill. He is actually quite well known, as at least up in Concord, as fighting against gambling, and he was kind of a more moderate guy. But
I voted for him in the primary.
You voted for him in the primary, but so he was not. I wouldn't call him a weak candidate, but he didn't have money. I mean, the amount of money you need to get the name recognition.
Oh, it's a hard knock game. I don't doubt it for 1 second.
And
I
it's
just wanted to get your input on that.
it's also
All right,
Thanks.
thanks, Ed.
And it's also easy. It's also easy if you have money to basically define your opponent before they can define themselves. And I
Yes.
think we saw an example of that in the 2nd Congressional District where Gary Hopper lives, where someone that both Gary and I know from the New Hampshire House, Mary Linda Garcia, ran for Congress, and she got in the race and she won the primary, and then proceeded to have $8 million worth of TV dropped in her head. Well, you know what? If they dropped $8 million of TV on Gary Hopper, well,
I know.
they might actually believe he's a Nazi.
It was Alexander Solzhenitsyn. That was it. That was the name I was trying to come up with. But anyway, if anybody has a chance to read that, it's online. All of it. It's actually an amazing critique of the American system, and that's why a lot of the liberals hated him after that.
I wonder, too, by the way, if part of Ed's question stems from because we saw a national Republican wave.
Right.
And New Hampshire seemed to be the big glaring exception in this national Republican wave that we saw. So I wonder if that contributes to the perception of we had weak candidates locally. on the
We
Republican side.
candidates, I guess, necessarily the ones who lose elections, right?
Yeah.
And there might be more to it than that, but we say, oh, well, you lost, so therefore you're a weak candidate. But if you'd won, you were a great candidate.
Right.
So I think that's true.
I wanted to touch on what Greg said about Marilinda. She was. I've been working with her for years.
8
up
years.
there. 8 years. She's actually a really good candidate. She really knows her stuff. She's wicked smart.
We had her on the show. I mean, I don't agree with her on a lot of things.
Oh,
She's too conservative for me. But we had her on the show, and she seemed to really be pretty solid as a candidate.
She's a bright lady, but
Yeah.
when you got, like you said, when you dump $6 million of ads within a short period of time, she's a caricature of herself. She's not. You never got to know the real Marilinda Garcia because you never will because it's so much money. I mean, look at Jean Sheen. She had like $14 million, not even including all the PACs.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's a
It's-
huge chunk of change.
And you can really define your opponent very well with that type of money. Although, looking back at the 2014 election, I'd say that the big issue at play wasn't so much, and I think, Matt, you touched on it, is because the wave did hit nationally. Why didn't it hit New Hampshire? If you look at the numbers, as to the numbers that the Republican candidates got, they're very similar to what the Republican candidates got in 2010.
Right.
The actual number of votes they got. The big difference was an enormous lift on the Democratic side. And how did that happen? That happened because the Democrats knew that they were facing a very unpopular president who's polling in the high 30s here in New Hampshire, and they were facing a case where on the issues, the public was strongly behind Republicans. So they realized that if they just went to war and fought in a battle place of ideas, they were going to lose. I mean, and it's cyclical. Some years you're up, some years you're down. But the issues grid was against them this year.
Yeah.
And they realized that if they just went toe to toe and let it happen that way, they were going to get. They would have seen the same thing we saw in New Hampshire in 2010 and across the country this year. And so what they said is, listen, we need to change the math. And the way they changed the math was by bringing an enormous number of bodies in to work for groups like Next Gen Climate, Planned Parenthood, the New Hampshire Democratic Party, the AFL-CIO, the teams just had a number of people out, the professional firefighters. A whole host of these groups put a huge number of bodies into New Hampshire, ready for Hillary PAC. They put a huge number of bodies into New Hampshire, and they were able to really maximize their base to get them out on Election Day.
Yeah.
And so even if there was a popularity contest, one team might beat the other team. The truth is, if you can get more people on that other team, eventually they're going to add up. Even though the average person might gravitate more towards the Republicans, if more of the Democrats show up, then they can balance it out. And that's what happened. And it ended up being a very even election. And it's funny because
not necessarily. If you look at the House seats and
I
the Senate seats.
I was going to finish. And if you look at New Hampshire, one of the things that we're accustomed to in the last 4 elections, we've had wave elections, just where one party swamps the other party, and you see some major shifts. And how many times has the House changed hands in the last? your head gets tired from swiveling back and forth.
Yeah, I've been under a lot of different speakers since I've been up here.
Exactly. So you have a situation where, for the first time in 10 years, New Hampshire did not have a wave election because the issues were so strongly favoring the Republicans and the turnout so strongly favored the Democrats. It actually ended up balancing out. So at the top of the ticket, very close races for U.S. Senate and governor. But just as a nature of how the state lays itself out, because of redistricting, Republicans have an advantage because the map in a balanced year favors Republicans in the New Hampshire House and the New Hampshire Senate. And that's what we saw. Republicans ended up picking up probably close to 240 House members out of 400 and 14 out of the 24 senators.
They need 270 for
veto override?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it's not a veto-proof majority like we saw from 2011 and 12, but it's a fairly substantial. But if you remember, Gary, back in 2004.
Is this more than 10 minutes ago?
Yeah, well, it's actually 10 years ago. So.
Oh no. Okay, probably won't.
Okay, so but in 2004, you remember the name of the Russian scholar? but if you remember in 2004, what it was the last very evenly balanced election.
Yeah.
That was the Bush-Kerry year, and also Craig Benson and John Lynch had a very, very close, very narrow list. It was 50.5 to 49.5.
Yeah.
There was about 240 House members. So when you have a very balanced election, that's pretty much what you end up with in terms of the makeup of the legislature. So I think it just has to do with a little bit has to do with the redistricting, but it was a very even year. One of the House seats went Republican. One of the U.S. House seats went Democrat. Very much a balanced year across the board. Very close race at the top of the ticket. And I think that for the right, and you can't say so much Republicans and Democrats anymore because there are so many other groups out there who are involved, and a lot of them are only focused on one or two issues or several issues. And I'm a group that focuses on a narrow group of issues, on economic issues. We don't focus on foreign policy, criminal justice, international relations, or anything like that. But there are other groups on both sides. So really, it's more the left versus the right. It's no longer so much a very clear delineation of Republican or Democrats. In fact, the party of power, the powers of party is dropping significantly. And if you look at the left, they've always been focused and very good at canvassing. and
Yeah, the
actually do
ground
the
game.
ground game of getting bodies out to vote. And it's something that the right isn't particularly good at. It never has
That
been.
actually makes sense. You know why?
Tell me.
I'm guessing. I don't know that you probably know the actual numbers, but we won't let that confuse the matter. If you look at it's like Winston Churchill said that if you're a liberal when you're young, that means you got a heart. If you're a conservative when you're 40, it means you have a brain.
Right.
So that people tend to start out pretty liberal when they're 20 or 30 years old, and then once they have children and a mortgage, they turn conservative because they don't really like the way their money's being spent. And so therefore, if you're the Democratic Party, you have people with young legs that are willing to go door to door and run around, whereas if you're in the conservative, there's only so far you want to go in a wheelchair.
That's a good. I think that's a good insight.
There might be some truth to that.
Instead of pole dancing.
That's right. That's right. But there's certainly a lot of truth to what you're saying. But I do think it's also just a philosophical approach to how the two sides view the electoral process, whereas the right tends to view at a battle of ideas. So they like to put their money on lots of TV ads and trying to win your hearts and minds. Whereas the left says, listen, we know where the bodies are. We're going to go find them and convince them to get out and vote. And that doesn't mean that the left can't win battles of hearts and minds, and the right can't do that. But it's just not the way that they're wired. They're culturally wired.
I think with social media too, I think that also plays a role. I think the left is better at using social media. I remember in 2012, analysts were saying the Obama campaign was much more effective in that regard than the Romney campaign was, just at using just things like Twitter, even that everybody in the modern era should know how to use for the sake of campaigning, but Obama's campaign was just much more adept at that.
They were very good.
Right.
Yeah.
No, there's no question that the evolution of campaigns is ongoing. A lot of it has to do with just a breakdown of local newspapers. Mm-hmm. If you look at the circulation numbers in local newspapers, people used to read newspapers to get their news, and that's collapsed. And as one of the consequences is national news outlets and national news internet sites have really been a new driver of where people get their political news. And so races are no longer localized. They now become nationalized because people are watching Fox News as opposed to reading, say, the Union Leader or the National Telegraph or the Concord Monitor. And so they're not getting their local news as much, and so they're voting Team Red or Team Blue. And I think there's a downside to that, and social media is one of the ways we can try to break through and start to localize races again. And I think it's a good evolution and a good development. But I think that there's no question that the left has jumped out and embraced technology a lot more readily than the right has. And it also has to do with demographics, because the demographics who would tend to absorb that message tend to be younger and more adept at adopting social media. You talk to your average 55-year-old Republican and ask them what they know about Snapchat, they're going to give you a blank look. I'll almost promise you that.
I don't think Gary, for example, should be on Snapchat.
It's probably for everybody.
Or Twitter, even, to be honest with you, Gary.
No.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a chance that Gary could limit his thoughts to 140 characters or less.
No. I don't understand that. How do you do that? You just not cut off halfway through a thought?
Well, in your case, that's probably what you would do, and then it would leave even more room for misunderstanding. That's my concern.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably best for everyone to just.
How much do you think the variable of having Scott Brown at the top of the ticket, who was at least vague on the Second Amendment. In New Hampshire, the people that will hold signs to you in the middle of winter or on November 4th every year are the Second Amendment people. Mm-hmm. Okay, they the ones who are kind of the base of the Republican Party in New Hampshire.
Well, that's generally speaking, there are three groups of people who really get out and work in the Republican coalition, which is usually it's a three-legged stool. It's they say it's the gunnies, the lifers, and the vets, and those are the three groups that will actually get out and work on the conservative movement. And
so you didn't have the Second Amendment people rooting for Scott Brown because he was.
Right, but I mean,
pathetic.
they were coming out to vote. They had
Yeah,
a strong
no.
supporter in Walt Havenstein, and they
Right.
had a strong supporter in both Frank Inta and Mary Linda Garcia. So they had a reason to get out and vote.
But they didn't have, like, I was standing there all day. I did not see anybody holding a Scott Brown sign.
Really?
Where? Okay. I saw Shaheen signs. I saw, signs. I didn't even see any signs for Walt.
Really?
Okay. I was holding one for Mary Linda, but I didn't see any other signs there for the
top level
the
candidates.
top level tickets. And I know that if you go on, like, again, back to the Facebook social media, on some of the private groups, a lot of people were trashing Brown for the Second Amendment stuff, and people are talking about writing in John Stark and all kinds of other crap. And so I asked him, so how do you know John Stark is pro-life?
Well,
I don't know.
Right.
But anyway,
I don't
so
think that was an issue back then.
yeah, so
Battle of Bennington didn't quite come up.
no.
There wasn't a lightning round at the Battle of Bennington.
So how much do you think that was a variable?
I
That's
think
part of that three-legged stool.
we'll probably find out over the long haul when the Secretary of State starts publishing some of the write-in candidates. There's no way of knowing. I don't think those people stayed home. I don't think they stayed home. I think they had other candidates that excited
Or
and
they
interested
just
them.
didn't fill it in, or
Right, but I mean, we'll find out later how many blanks there were and how many write-ins there were, and that's always an important number to look at as well. But from my perspective, I really think that the vast majority of the folks who are conservatives, and that's because Republicans. It's true that the Republicans are a larger group than the Democrats, but there still are a lot of conservatives who are independents who
Yes.
who tend to vote Republican.
yeah.
And I haven't seen any evidence that the folks I would just describe them as the more conservatives decided to stay away. I think ultimately they decided that as much as they might have a disagreement with Scott Brown, they still liked him better than they liked Jeanne Shaheen. And although Senator Shaheen obviously has had and not an abysmal record on the Second Amendment, the way, for example, Representative Shea Porter has consistently voted against the Second Amendment.
Right. Yeah, she's not. Yeah, I know. It was hard. I know personally, it was difficult for me to motivate me to fill in that blank.
Yeah.
And
But I mean, I think it was difficult, but they did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's
They
a
held
lot
their
of people-
nose and
Yeah.
Exactly. There's actually somebody posted a picture of them with a nose clip on.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, but if you're holding your nose to vote for the top of the ticket, that means you're not that motivated to be there for him anyway.
well,
And
but,
I know
but
people
like I
don't
said
show
though,
up to
I
vote for
showed
state rep.
I looked at some of the numbers,
Except my
and I
wife.
didn't see the drop off among Republicans that you would expect if the Republicans weren't as motivated, or if their base weren't as excited, or they weren't as angry as they were in 2010. The numbers are the same. The big difference is the increase in the number of votes on the Democratic side.
Okay.
So I think it has more to do with the fantastic ground game, and that's a ground game because again, you're talking about a president who's running at 38%. So to get those folks motivated when there was all talk before the election was, are these people dispirited? Are these people do they have any reason to come and vote? And at least in New Hampshire, the left was able to get to those people and motivate them and convince them that it was critical to get out and vote.
Right. I know. I was listening to Rush Limbaugh today, and he was saying that Scott Brown lost his election years ago because he was elected to go down there and fight against Obamacare. He was like the deciding. That was huge, and even the people in the liberal Massachusetts were really upset about Obamacare and voted him in. Then he went down there and says, "Well, I'm in a liberal district. I got to compromise," and it was just he lost that base.
I'd say that one of the great joys of elections is the ex post facto rationalizations that take place, where someone develops a narrative and allows it to fit the facts that they want it to, and finds some reason to make their narrative fit the facts.
Yeah.
I think that folks are better suited to actually spend time to take the work and look through the numbers and see what you can find, and frequently it's in the numbers, whether it's in the exit polling or the actual election results, that the numbers are in there, and the exit polling shows that Senator Sheen was running almost 17 points ahead of people's opinions of Obama. So 17%
Wow.
of the people who voted didn't like Obama but voted for Shaheen. And that is a fairly remarkable occurrence. Is that you
is,
could convince folks that they dislike the president, but they're going to vote for someone who's consistently supported that agenda.
Right.
It's a sort of a cognitive dissonance there.
That is
Right.
remarkable. Yeah.
The other one I was wondering is, what do you? Some of the pundits are saying that this is a mandate nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
But then I flip back and forth. I almost get whiplash because I listen to the talk radio and then I flip over to national propaganda radio. And one thing they pointed out in national propaganda radio was that of the vote count for this year was actually hasn't been this low nationally since the World War II.
Oh, I didn't know
percentage-wise.
that. Really? Wow.
So although we saw a huge surge in New Hampshire and a few key places around the country, people are not that motivated to go.
I think it speaks, Gary, and it's something you touched on earlier, and it's a very important point. The amount of money that came into this state for folks like Representative Custer, for Senator Shaheen. The Democratic Party and generally the left, as a group, put a whole bunch of resources into this state.
Yeah.
And those are resources that had to come from somewhere.
Right.
And so while Scott Brown might have lost, and while Walt Havenstein and Mary Linda Garcia lost, the resources that came in to beat them are resources that came from other states. And so you see a situation like other senators being elected. You see a situation where Republicans are winning governorships in Maine and Massachusetts, and in other states across the country, while at the same time Democrats are retaining the Senate and the governor's race here. So I mean,
in other words, we took a hit so that Republicans could win elsewhere.
Well, I mean, that's one way of looking at it, because the level of resources that had to come. You saw it on TV. All you had to do was turn on a TV or go outside, and if you were in a city watching the people canvassing, walk up and down the streets in Manchester. We saw it because we actually do canvassing as well. We
thought that's
we
why
were
we passed
heavily
Plenty Ground.
outnumbered.
No, not quite.
But the bottom line, though, Gary, is that those resources they have to be allocated somewhere, and someone within the hierarchy, or several people within the hierarchy of the Democratic Party, decided that New Hampshire was going to get those resources, and to the extent that other states lost them, it means that it created an opportunity for other states to potentially maybe hold on to the governorship in Massachusetts or in Maine, because because those dollars came to New Hampshire.
And as far as Congress, too, I mean, historically, when you have a two-term president, the midterms and that second term, it's the opposing party who gets a big wave, with the exception of Bill Clinton, when voters kind of published Republicans over the impeachment thing.
It's very rare. 2002, Republicans picked up seats, but it usually takes something particularly egregious or structurally changing to get the party to flip against to support the party that's in power in the presidency. In 1998, it was the attempt to impeach President Clinton. In 2002, it was 9/11.
Yeah.
That basically caused people to rally to the party in power. But that's very, very uncommon. It's
No,
usually
well,
like you're saying, Matt. It's where people because the people who are angry are the people who are out of power.
Right, exactly.
Well, 94, you had a flip, was when the Clintons introduced gun legislation and Hillary Care.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was in his first term, though. So
that was in his first
little
term.
unusual.
But it was, like you say, it was a rally against policy.
Right.
The difference was that Clinton, to his credit, said, "Oh, wow, that was stupid."
Drove him to the middle.
And then he drove him back to the middle, where he
signed
worked with
welfare
Republicans.
reform.
Yep.
Welfare reform.
Signed a whole bunch of tax cuts.
Tax cuts.
Defense of Marriage Act.
The economy got really good.
Right. He decided to move back to
He
a
really
moderate
liked being
position.
president and wanted to get reelected.
And then Republicans overreached in 98 and attempted to impeach him, and that really rallied the Democratic base, who felt as though that their leader was being railroaded.
Yeah.
And so they turned out pretty emphatically and ended up having a situation where where traditionally you see the midterm election go against the president's party, but in this case it actually went with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
know.
really, it's right. The second, because usually it's the second midterm. So the midterm of the second term, that's usually when the party in power suffers some pretty significant ones.
Yeah.
It wasn't as possible because the Democrats lost so much in 2010 that Republicans, by winning in 2010, were able to get involved in redistricting, and when they did that, they aligned the districts in a more Republican friendly fashion. So it's going to be really challenging for the House of Representatives to ever go Democrat before 2022 at the earliest.
Wow.
So,
You really think so?
absolutely.
Yeah, because it seems like
Because there are more safe seats on both sides, and it's just a case where the actual battleground gets very, very small.
Yeah.
well, I know, but there seems like that one of the accusations is through illegal immigration. They're trying to start stacking the deck to get to fix some of that.
Well, I would say that ultimately the safe seats, at least for the first two elections since redistricting in 2010, that's pretty well shown. Is that even in a year when President Obama was winning nationally, the Republicans were able to hold with a significant majority in the U.S. House.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened particularly in the Senate. I mean, the New Hampshire House redistricting, because there's a constitutional amendment that forces small districts, really doesn't allow the type of gerrymandering that you see in other states, or in larger districts like U.S. House districts. But the New Hampshire Senate is very well aligned for safe seats and for both parties, and the battleground gets very small.
I know. It's like I thought my district, Senate district, was pretty conservative, but he won. Jerry Little won, but it was not as much of a
Well, I mean,
landslide
that's a district that goes up to Sullivan County and
Yeah.
parts of Sullivan County that aren't particularly as conservative as, say, Ware.
Yeah.
And so while your corner of the county is fairly conservative and fairly Republican in nature, there are a lot of other parts of that district that are not quite as friendly for Republicans or conservatives.
Just to clarify, was his victory? It was a closer margin than you were expecting.
Yeah, I actually were, but I thought the district was more conservative than what you're just saying. You're telling me anyway. So,
But it's still a Republican-leaning district, and that's what happens when you have state senate in New Hampshire, where you don't have a constitutional amendment that forces you to redistrict in a certain way. That's something that's just a byproduct of redistricting, and the party in power always gets to control the map.
Right.
right.
In the case of Jerry Little, is it possible that he just didn't maybe motivate conservatives? Because we had him on the show, and he struck me as very moderate.
Yeah, he's not a. I mean, I'm sure he's good on the Second Amendment.
Yeah,
He's not
but I
gonna be-
wonder if conservatives just weren't motivated to come out
And
and
I
vote
think
for
he's
him.
kind of pro-choice, so he's more
Yeah.
of a moderate
Yeah.
Republican. So yeah,
That was
maybe.
my impression of him.
Yeah, he's a nice guy.
Oh yeah,
I really
very
like him.
much. No, I liked him. I mean, he's the kind of Republican I would support.
Yeah. So that means I don't like him then.
But I mean, ultimately, you've got a situation now where you've got divided power, and unlike in 2011 and 2012, it's not a veto-proof majority, so everybody has to work together. And if anything's going to happen, there's a lot of speculation that Governor Hassan's looking to run for U.S. Senate in 2 years against Senator Ayotte. And so she's got a situation where she's probably the most motivated to get some stuff done because she needs some wins.
Yeah.
If you're going to run for U.S. Senate, you have to demonstrate that you've done something.
Got to build that resume.
Exactly. It's not good enough that you pounded the table the loudest. It's not
Right.
usually an effective campaign strategy for a governor. So she's going to try to find a way, really, I think, to not take the position that President Obama took. President Obama took a very defiant tone to lose in the
Right.
U.S. Senate, which just basically is his announcement that the last 2 years of his term are going to be particularly unproductive.
Right.
It's not going to be a very constructive
I don't know
work
that, I
in
don't know
Washington.
that they won't be productive. I think he seems to be inclined to do things through executive order that might start being on the verge
Well,
of almost
and
unconstitutional.
what we saw
And
is
the problem is
what we saw
Republicans
is
don't have the nerve to actually do something about it.
Actually, there were I think that's I believe it was I think we're up to 10 of his executive orders that have been found unconstitutional and struck down, and I suspect there's going to be a lot of litigation. I think that the Supreme Court's going to be very busy looking over the constitutionality of executive orders. And that's going to be, I mean, it's going to create even more frustration with how Washington's working right now, and it's not going to help President Obama's approval ratings long term. It's going to make him look more petty when he's not trying to use the normal process. We expect our elected officials to go through the process that's developed in the Constitution. Legislators propose laws, executives sign or veto them, and that's how the process is done. And if the president's saying, well, you know what, I don't like that process because it's not getting me what I want, I don't think that the vast majority of Americans are gonna find that particularly a particularly attractive way of governing. And I think that's going to have a really negative consequence for whoever is a Democratic nominee for president in 2016, because they're going to have to wear the baggage of a president who is trying to circumvent Congress, potentially getting struck down regularly by the Supreme Court, like he has recently, getting spanked.
Isn't that still the system working, though? I mean, in fairness, if he's
well, yeah,
enacting executive orders, and then you have the judicial branch
striking
them down. I mean, that's still the three branches of the government working.
But things aren't getting done. I mean, the people want to see some activity. They want to see positive steps taken to get the economy moving. They want to see people doing stuff that's going to help people. And it's not even jobs are important, but what I'm hearing now, particularly in New Hampshire, where we have relatively low unemployment, it's not so much about jobs. Jobs are important, but people want to see more money in their pockets.
Yeah.
And they want to see in a growing economy to get to their more money in their pockets. And that's really where I think that where sort of a gridlock in Washington is going to really undermine the ability to have effective public policy that's going to help put more money in people's pockets. Because over the long haul, we've been in this sort of malaise.
Oh,
okay, we're in a recovery, but does anyone feel like the economy is getting better?
Weakest recovery of our lifetimes.
I mean, exactly. So people want to see that something's happening in Washington. They're frustrated at home because their purchasing power is dropping, but they're not seeing anything going on in Washington to actually do something productive about that. So I would say that the American people usually hold it. Whenever they're upset, they usually hold it against the president.
Right.
And the president pays the price. We've been seeing that. And so it's disappointing. And I just hope that that Governor Hassan at the state level doesn't take the same approach of simply saying, you know what, I've got to make sure that I can appeal to all liberal constituencies for my campaign in 2016. So I'm gonna try to be a champion for the left. If that happens, I think it ultimately will work against her because if you're running as a governor, people actually want to see what you did to help them.
Yeah.
And that's particularly true in the executive as opposed to the judicial branch.
Sure.
The legislative branch where people like Gary can just go onto the House floor and throw grenades. Verbal grenades.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
You get me excited there. That's
I know, right? Yeah, that sounds fun.
Hand grenades.
I didn't think of that.
Exactly. The executive, they expect you to actually get something done.
Right.
So Governor Hassan's going to be looking for some wins, and it's going to be interesting to see how she works together to try to get there. And that's going to be a strange dynamic because the governor has either been in the legislative branch or in a executive branch, who's been, when she's been the first term in governor, first 2 years, she's had a legislature she's been willing to play ball, who's been willing to play ball with her, and I think that she might find a little bit more of a struggle this time. So
the thing is, isn't that conversely, if the let's say we have the same aggressive leadership in the House again this term. And it's like a completely adversarial.
Well, I think that
because the law.
I certainly we both. I mean, I was working.
I know
you were working too, but only for $100 a year.
Right.
And the New Hampshire House
made me feel stupid.
But it's a different dynamic. the leadership and Speaker Bryan's no different. Is you have to understand the environment around you. If the environment is you have a veto-proof majority, you have to get people constantly angry at the governor to continue to override the vetoes. And you guys voted to override a lot of his vetoes. I mean, a historic number of vetoes were overridden in
Correct.
2011 and 12. But the way you do that is by constantly creating a sort of an adversarial relationship. Now, whoever's speaker, if it's Speaker O'Brien, he's going to realize I don't have a veto-proof majority, so now I have to find a way to negotiate the best deal for me.
You're not going to get 30 Democrats to go along with trying to override.
Exactly. Override a Democratic governor who's probably considering running for U.S. Senate, and
Right.
so therefore the standard bearer for them that they have to run with.
Right.
So I would say that the leadership has to focus on what's available to you, and whoever's speaker, and I think it's highly possible that Speaker O'Brien's back again. He'll get that. He'll appreciate the fact that you need to work, but without giving up your principles. And so they'll be interesting to see if there's common ground that can be found, because, like I said, the governor really needs some wins if she's going to be bolstered for her campaign if she wants to run for U.S. Senate in 2 years.
That's one thing since I've been up there, I never give up my principles unless it's like free food.
Okay.
Yeah, lasagna
Right.
and whatnot.
If you
yeah.
feed them, they will come.
Right.
Yeah, there you
It's
go.
like that's one thing that upset me with O'Brien is like he threatened me to take away my chairmanship if I didn't vote for right to work.
Mhm.
Okay, whatever.
Mhm.
But he never offered me like a cannoli or something.
You know,
That would have
That
softened the
would've
blow.
worked.
you know what
That
it
would've
is. You know what it is.
worked. Yeah, yeah.
So maybe what you're looking for is an Italian speaker.
Yes, I would be
Okay.
more inclined
So
to
you better-
vote for
better
like
baked
Al
goods?
Baldessaro or
Better
something.
baked goods, right?
Right, better baked goods. Al Baldessaro I think would be really good. Judy cooks really well, so right.
Yeah, well, I guess. I don't
So
know.
I guess I just
Cannolis,
start
you get your cannolis, right?
get my cannolis and I'm good. I'll do whatever you want. You know what I'm saying?
That can be your campaign slogan. Next time, you won this time, of course.
Right,
but
right.
next time, if it's a little dicey, you need a good
Put the
catchy
cannolis
slogan.
out there.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
anyway, I got three basic legislative initiatives that I'm working on, and I wanted to get your feedback. One is and I think I've already heard this one, is that on July 10th I was rear-ended on my motorcycle with my grandson in the car on the motorcycle. He got thrown about 10 feet. My arm still is all screwed up from that, and so I want to introduce legislation because the 17-year-old kid that hit us, a male, I'm pretty sure was girl watching. So I want to introduce legislation to require all women in New Hampshire to have to wear burqas. Right, that was one.
It's for safety.
That's
Safety
it.
first.
That's right.
If you save one life, isn't it worth it? Isn't that the
How much is one life worth?
right? Exactly. Isn't that the battle cry of the other party? So that's one wicked good idea. And then my other wicked good idea is we found. I said this last week. We found out that if you go into Massachusetts with just a casing, an empty case from a cartridge, like a 22 cartridge, you shoot a bunch and the kids grab a couple and put them in their pockets and it falls on the floor of your car, it's in your car. I think it's 1 year in jail. I know it's against the law. I don't know what the penalty is. Okay? So I want to, because obviously there's people from New Hampshire going, holy crap, I'm at the Mass border, and they're throwing out all this brass out the end of the side of their vehicles,
Have you
right?
seen the money, the cost of spot brass right now?
Exactly, right? So what I want to do
Brass receptacles on the borders.
No.
No, even better.
No, better. This is better than that. I want to make it illegal for somebody from Massachusetts, a Massachusetts resident in New Hampshire, to be in the state without brass in their car.
Okay.
So they'll pick it up on their way in, and,
Right.
and it's a way of it's an environmentally friendly.
We'll also probably keep those out-of-state voters from coming in on election day.
Actually,
Yeah,
very
yeah,
good,
yeah.
very good. Then, and this is the one that's actually come a little bit close to home probably for me is I don't know if you've ever run into this, but you got your cereal, right? And it's you got like flakes, like Frosted Flakes or something, and you pour.
Are
it
you a
in
marshmallow or no marshmallow guy?
I don't like marshmallows in my cereal. So
Okay.
anyway, because I just eat straight up, I'm healthy like that. So
I heard that about you.
yeah, so you You know how when you pour the milk in there, the flakes sometimes they're like hooked up and it shoots out over onto the counter and stuff like that if you pour it too fast.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's right. That's not
No.
reasonable. It's not.
No.
It's
a waste of milk.
It's a waste of milk. The state has a
Think about how
vested interest.
the cows had to work for that milk.
Exactly.
right.
So my legislation will require that all cereals in the state of New Hampshire are either spherical in shape, triangular in shape, or granular,
Okay.
so that it pours evenly. The milk goes in evenly without splashing.
Can
all
we
over.
call this the Let's Cry Over Spilt Milk Bill?
Yeah, that's actually
That's
that's
good,
really
yeah,
good.
yeah,
That's really good. I can see you're gonna as Americans Prosperity will support that, right?
Absolutely. Let's Cry Over Spilt Milk Bill.
Hey, I wanted to ask you, Americans Prosperity. I don't know how much you guys spent in the state of New Hampshire, but how much did the that green group you mentioned them earlier?
Next Gen Climate.
Next Gen Climate is also another rich guy that has,
Tom Steyer is
Tom
a
Steyer.
fellow who founded it.
and he spent I don't know how many millions this election.
I don't know. I mean, I've heard that just in terms of some of the online and online advertising and some of the boots on the ground, it was 3.75 million
In New Hampshire?
Here in New Hampshire, in the
Wow.
last probably only about 8 months.
Wow, how much did Americans for Prosperity? Well, it's got two brothers. The other guy's just one person. Two brothers are splitting the cost for New Hampshire. How much did the Koch brothers spend?
I have no idea about the Koch brothers.
Really?
No, I don't know. They have to ask them. I don't know about
Oh,
that.
I thought they had spent it through Americans for Prosperity. No?
You know, I keep reading that, but I don't
Is that
see any
actually not
paychecks
true?
that actually say
Yeah.
Koch brothers. I haven't seen
Only
them.
one of them sits on the board, right?
David Koch sits on the 501c3
Okay.
Americans for Prosperity Foundation board.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
We actually have two organizations. One is the group that he chairs. Actually, is our research and educational.
Now, David Koch also supports Nova.
Right.
I was watching Nova, and
Right.
David Koch is one of the supporters of Nova. So is Nova a Republican right-wing conspiracy? I would think it has to be.
You know,
right?
I'm not really the best person to assess that. Maybe somebody on the left could probably give you more guidance.
Because it seems like it must be.
Right, and
Because-
apparently now the United Negro College Fund is also part
Well,
of.
he
the
supports
Koch.
that too.
Absolutely.
Oh, so this is right up there with the Illuminati and other nefarious conspiracies. He supports the United Negro College Fund
Right.
and Nova.
Right.
Wow, so he is really bad.
And the Lincoln Center down in New York.
The Lincoln Center,
Yeah, and cancer research.
cancer research.
Cancer research. That's where I draw the line.
I know.
right.
Yeah, that if he's spending money on that, can't you stop him? Can't we? Can't we pass legislation to keep him from using his money for such horrible and devious deeds?
As cancer research,
Cancer research.
can't have that.
No, can't.
But
We already know cancer is bad.
We are.
Is
Yeah.
that
Why do we have
research,
to
really?
research? I know. I got it all over my neck. I know it's bad. I
Yeah,
mean,
there
what-
you go. You don't need
right.
research to tell you.
Yeah. Hey, so anyway, there's another idea I had.
okay.
And it's I had a really cool word for it too. But instead of all those groups spending all that money on ads, okay, so I don't know how many millions of dollars were spent in just on ads and everything on the Senate races.
I'll tell you, WMUR has a pretty building, don't they?
Yes,
It probably didn't come cheap.
I'm surprised they don't actually auction off the last few weeks of advertising. I shouldn't say that. Anyway, so my idea is instead of that, because there's all the libertarian types in the House that are currently trying to get people to photograph their ballot,
Ballots, correct.
which
Oh,
I
yeah.
think is a really unwise idea. But it could work out really well because instead of fronting all that money for advertising, what you do is you go and hand people like gift certificates, and if you come to Subway and you can prove that you voted for Gene Shaheen, they give you a free sub.
Well, there you go. I mean, you're a man ahead of your time, Gary.
I know, but that's what we could go to instead of all.
I notice you work food into a lot of these
That's
ideas.
what
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
That's-
Have you,
it's probably a connection.
have you not had supper yet?
I haven't eaten yet.
Okay, there's a correlation there, I think.
No way. Hey, Greg, thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah,
and,
thanks, Greg.
Absolutely.
Matt, right? Matt,
yes.
Thanks for. What do you do?
I kind of sit here and say stuff.
Oh, okay.
That's kind of my official
Nice
title.
saying. Nice saying.
Thank
were
you,
Good
yeah.
at that.
I try.
All right, thank you, folks. We'll see you next
Bye,
week.
everybody.